In this chapter, we'll be discussing the employment termination in Malaysia. Employers basically have the right to terminate employees. However, this right is actually not absolute. Any termination must be carried out fairly, lawfully, and by the following proper procedure. At the same time, employees are protected by law against unfair or unjust dismissal. There are two main laws that govern employment termination in Malaysia. We have the first one is Employment Act 1955, which regulates employment contracts, and then we have minimum employment standard and the procedure relating to the termination of service. And then the second one is the Industrial Relations Act 1967, which provides employee with the right to challenge dismissal if they believe it was made without just cause or excuse. And then in addition to this act, court decision, also known as a case law, plays an important role in interpreting the law and strengthening legal principles related to employment termination. According to the study by Narasha Othman and her colleagues published in 2022, the major cause of employment termination disputes include employee misconduct, employers' lack of knowledge of employment law, and weak enforcement of labor legislation. Therefore, it is actually important for both employees and employees to understand their rights and responsibilities to ensure that every termination is conducted fairly, legally, and in accordance with the Malaysian employment laws. For the first case under this topic, I will be discussing the first case, which is the case of Muhammad Tramizi Hussein versus Villa Trans Engineering's Number Hut. This case will focus on whether a probationary employee can be terminated fairly while he is on the medical leave following a work-related accident. Muhammad Tramizi was employed as technician by Villa Trans on 13 September 2023, and he was still under a 6-month probation until 7 December 2023. And then he was involved in a road accident while travelling to carry out the maintenance work. As a result, he suffered from a serious spinal injuries and was placed on continuous medical leave. Later, his condition was confirmed as permanent disability. However, while he was still on the sick leave, the company issued a 1-month termination notice. The company claimed that the termination was due to economic downturn, workforce reduction, and then organizational restructuring. The claimant then challenged the dismissal because there was no clear evidence of poor performance, genuine restructuring, and proper consideration of his medical condition. Several legal provisions were relevant in this case. First, Section 20, Subsection 3 of the Industrial Relations Act 1967 allow dismissal disputes without just cause or excuse to be referred to the industrial court. And then second, we have Section 30, Subsection 5 gives the industrial court power to decide based on equity, conscience, and the merits of the case. The court also referred to the Section 15, Subsection 2 of the Employment Act regarding the employee absence due to certified sick leave. In addition, the Employee Social Security Act 1969 was relevant because the accident was considered an employment injury and the medical board was assessed disability of or work capacity. Finally, practice note number 3 of 2019 was used as guidance for remedies, especially for the calculation of back wages for probationary employees. The industrial court decided in favor of the claimant. The court found that a company failed to prove that the termination was made with just cause or excuse. The company did not provide sufficient evidence to support its claim of restructuring, workforce reduction, or poor performance by the claimant. The court also considered it as an unfair that the claimant was terminated while he was still recovering from a work-related accident and was on medical leave. Although the court did not order reinstatement because of the employment relationship and industrial harmony, it awarded financial compensation. The claimant can receive about 20,644 ringgit and 10 cents after deduction of including back wages for 7 months. This case shows that probationary employees are still protected by unfair dismissal. Being probation doesn't mean that employee can terminate employee without valid reasons and supporting document. For HR practitioners, termination decision must be supported by proper documentation such as a performance records, genuine evidence of organizational restructuring. HR should also consider the employee's medical condition, obtain suitable medical assessment, and explore reasonable alternatives such as lighter duties or alternative job placement before deciding on termination. Overall, this case highlights the importance of fairness, transparent communication, proper procedure, and balancing the organization needs with employee welfare.
Hi, my name is Munawar Shasha binti Kiran. So I'm going to explain about this case. Muhammad Apri bin Jaidi versus Asian Institute of Alternative Dispute Resolution, or also known as AIADR. So now I'm going to explain the fact of the case. Muhammad Apri bin Jaidi was a Singaporean citizen and was employed as head of secretariat at AIADR under a 3-year contract. And then the employer dissatisfied with Muhammad Apri performance, especially in web development project, uh, financial reporting, and communication and transparency. And then the employer proposed a mutual termination, but Muhammad Apri rejected the proposal and later he resigned. And Muhammad Apri alleged forced resignation and filed an unfair dismissal claim. So now we go to the relevant statutory provision. So this case is under Section 20/3 Industrial Relation 1967 that allows an employee to file representation if he believes that he has been dismissed without just cause or excuse. And then under Section 30/5 under Industrial Relation 1967 that requires the industrial court to decide cases based on equity, good conscience, and the substantial merits of the case. So this case-related legal principles is constructive dismissal, which employees must prove that the resignation was forced by the employer. And then burden of proof. The employer also must prove that the termination was made with just cause and excuse. Now we go to the court decisions. So the industrial court dismissed Mr. Apri's claim because the court held that Mr. Apri failed to prove that he was forced to resign or constructive dismissal. And then the employer successfully proved that there were valid reasons for dissatisfaction, particularly regarding poor performance in website development project, failure to provide financial reports, and lack of communication and transparency. The court also found that Mr. Apri had been informed about his performance issue through several meetings and discussion. The employer had therefore established on the balance of probabilities that the termination was made with just cause and excuse. So the court decisions is the claimant's representation under Section 20 of the Industrial Relation 1967 was rejected. The relevant and reflection of this case is employee must prove constructive dismissal. So when an employee believes that he was forced to resign, he must prove the constructive dismissal. And the second one is employer can terminate for poor performance with valid evidence. And then communication and proper documentation are essential. Next, employees should be given opportunities to improve before termination. So for employer, you must give opportunities or chance to the employee before deciding to terminate. And the last one is fair procedures help prevent employment disputes. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum and good day to our lecturer. Today I would like to present my case, which is misuse of sick leave lead to termination, which is the case of the Cik Zamri bin Cik Ani versus MAB Cargo Sdn Bhd. So, for the first one, let me explain the fact of the case. The facts is Cik Zamri is work as a cargo warehouse acceptance officer at MAB Cargo for 6 years. In May 2021, He was involved in a serious motor vehicle accident and suffered multiple fractures, including injuries to his clavicle, fibula, and also wrist. Because of his injuries, he was granted 111 days of paid medical leave to recover. However, during the period, the employer, Cik Zamri, discovered that he was performing physical demanding activities such as climbing trees, operating chainsaw to cut the trees, and playing sepak takraw. These activities raised concern because they were inconsistent with the purpose of the medical leave. Employer believed that the employee had misused his medical leave. To investigate the matter, the company collected evidence including photograph and video recording showing the employee participating in those activities. A show cause letter was then issued asking him to explain his misconduct. In his reply, the employee admitted that he had participate in those activities, but arguing that he was only helping his neighbor and performing light work as advised by his doctor. Despite of his explanation, the employer concluded that the employee had breached the trust placed in him and decided to terminate his employment. Next, let's go to the relevant law that involved in this case. There are three of the legal references. The first one is Section 20 of the Industrial Relations Act 1967, which allow an employee to challenge a dismissal if they believe it was made without just cause or excuses. The second one is Section 40 of the Employment Act 1955, which allow an employer to dismiss an employee for misconduct after providing due inquiry or procedural fairness. Lastly, the company employee handbook clearly states that a medical leave must only be used for recovery and that dishonest conduct would not be tolerated. Let's move on to the court decision. The industrial court ruled of favor of MAB Cargo Sdn Bhd. The court found that the employee had sufficient evidence including the photograph, video, medical report, and also the employee on admission. The court also decided that although the domestic inquiry was not conducted, the employee had already been given an opportunity to explain his actions through the show cause process before. Therefore, procedural fairness had been observed. The court concluded that the employer had lost trust and confidence in the employee, making the dismissal lawful and justified. For the reflection, from my perspective, I agree with the court decision. Medical leave is provided to allow employee to recover from illness or injury, not to participate in strenuous activities that may contradict their medical leave condition. This case may remind us that honesty and integrity are essential in maintaining a good employment relationship. So the employers also have the responsibility to conduct a fair investigation before making disciplinary action or decision. The key legal principle in this case, we have learned 5 important legal principles. The first one is abuse of sick leave may amount to serious misconduct. The second one is employers may rely on lawfully obtained evidence such as photograph and also videos. The third one is trust and confidence are fundamental in every employment relationship. And the employees must always be given procedural fairness before dismissal. Finally, the employer has the burden of proving misconduct on the balance of probability. For the conclusion, in this case demonstrate that misuse of sick leave can justify termination when supported by clear evidence and also a fair disciplinary process. It is also highlight the importance of honesty, employer trust, and also compliance with company policy in maintaining a healthy employment relationship with the company.
First, I will explain the fact of the case. This case involved Lindsay Chow, who was employed by TW Technology M Sdn Bhd as a back-end developer. on 23rd October 2023 with a monthly salary RM 12,000. He was employed under 3-month probationary period. On his first day, he was assigned to develop the company website using the source code provided by the company. However, after only 2 days of employment, the company verbally informed him that his employment would be terminated and later issue a termination letter starting failure to meet probationary requirement. The chairman argued that he was not given enough time or sufficient opportunities to prove his ability. He claimed he was only asked to review the source code and was not given any real programming task. On the other hand, the company argued that he failed to perform the core duties of a back-end developer and that he had mispresented his technical skill during the recruitment process. Okay, next I will explain the court decision. The industrial court decide in favor of the employer. The court found that the claimant was still a probationary employee because he had been confirmed yet in his position. The court accept the company's evidence that the claimant was unable to perform the essential duties of a back-end developer even after being provided with the source code. The company also noted that the claimant could not provide evidence to support the experience and technical skill stated in his resume. Alright, so therefore, the court conclude that the employer act reasonably without bad faith or unfair treatment, and the dismissal was just because an excuse. As a result, the claimant's case was dismissed. Now, I will explain the legal provision that apply in this case. First, Section 20 in bracket 3 of Industrial Relation Act 1967. This section allow an employee to challenge a dismissal if they believe it was without just cause or excuse. The industrial court then decides whether the dismissal was lawful. This is the main legal basis of this case. Second section 30 in bracket 5 of Industrial Relation Act 1967. This section requires the industrial court to decide the case based on equity, good consequence, and the substantial merit of the case, not merely on technical legal rule. Alright, in this case, the court look at all the evidence, including the claims, performance, the employer assessments, and whether the employer act fairly. Alright, the third section is Section 14 of the Employment Act 1955. Although this section mainly deal with dismissal for misconduct after due inquiry, this case involve poor performance, not misconduct. Right. So, however, the principle of the procedure fairness is still relevant because employees should make fair, reasonable decision before terminating an employee. Alright. Lastly, probationary employee principle under Malaysia common law. Probationary employees are still protected by law. Okay. However, employer have the right to terminate a probationary employee if the employee cannot perform required job, provide the assessment, uh, provide the assessment is honest, reasonable and free from bad faith. The court found that this principle were followed in this case. Alright, finally, I would like to explain the relevance and reflection of this case. This case demonstrates that the probationary employee are still protected under Malaysian employment law. At the same time, employer also have the right to terminate probationary employee if there is genuine evidence of poor performance. The key point is that the employer must act fairly, reasonably, and without bad faith. Dismissal decision should be based on objective evidence rather than personal opinions. For me, this case highlights the importance of clear job expectations, proper performance evaluations, and honest communication during the recruitments. It also teach employee to be truthful and about their qualifications and remind employee to document performance issue before making dismissal decisions.
For the conclusion, as for the key lesson that we can learn from these cases, employment termination must be based on just cause and excuse. Employers must provide sufficient evidence and follow fair procedures. Employees are protected against unfair dismissal under the Industrial Relations Act 1967. For the documentation, maybe we can have a proper documentation, clear communication, and also enough of legal compliance can help to prevent employment disputes. And then the employee should maintain honesty, professionalism, and also comply with the workplace policies. For the overall reflection as a HR practitioner, we can also enhance the understanding of Malaysian employment law through the real industrial court cases. We also can learn the balance between employers' managerial right and also employees' legal protection. Recognize the importance of fairness, professionalism, and also legal compliance in HR practices. This cases analysis has prepared us to apply ethical principle and also legal considerations when making HR decision, ensuring that fairness and compliance in future practices.